some unique features with this latest release. Before we get started, just a few notes. If you have any questions, please enter them through the question panel in your control panel for GoToWebinar. We'll do our best to answer them in line if we can. If not, we'll just queue them up at the end and then get to them then. Let's talk about a few more things before BlackLight. We know a lot of you have Macquisition, a product in addition to BlackLight, and just wanted to make sure everyone knew we did do a release for this on the 12th of February with some new technology, especially around booting a lot of the new Mac hardware. So Macquisition we're excited as ever about. It is the most comprehensive tool in the market to boot the most wide array of Macs out there. One note is if you do encounter classics, older Macs, we do have an ISO disk available. So just get in touch with our support folks. Be happy to give that to you to boot the older hardware as well. Also wanted to make everyone available about 95E. It's an online tutorial that we've created, about 2 hours of content for BlackLight. It's free to all customers, and it's modularized, so you can actually go in and pick either the analysis features, reporting features, different views to understand them better with regards to the product. If you have any colleagues that just got BlackLight, please let them know about the product. Again, it's a great way to come up to speed as well as finding out the latest features. One of the modulars is what's new, in fact. This is available through the VBT web account, so just log in or create a new account. Again, if you have any questions, please let our support folks know. All right, let's get to the meat of the broadcast here, which is to talk about the latest release for BlackLight. As many of you saw in email, we have some robust new features we're really, really excited about. This is our first foray into timeline. So it's a brand new feature that, like many of the views in BlackLight, what we're trying to accomplish is to bring the data closer to the analyst. So the ability to compare devices, look at usage patterns as well as non-usage patterns across communications and file metadata timestamps is an important feature that we are trying to tie into the comprehensive approach for BlackLight analysis. We've also made some additions to the content views themselves. Our file filter, which a lot of customers use quite successfully, was a little bit isolated, and so we now have the ability within the views for messaging, phone, internet, to actually create filters within that view. So again, you can more quickly cull down the data set to what's relevant. We've expanded our internet support. Internet Explorer is brand new with this release, as well as changing the view for the other browsers, and Drew will walk you through some of those. And the last item of note is Windows. We have gotten a lot of feedback over the years from customers. You know, they know us as the Mac experts and the iOS guys, but ever since, obviously, Apple went to a dual boot capability and virtualization, a lot of our customers are encountering Windows data in their Mac analysis, or iOS data within a Windows partition or a Windows image. And so we're excited to take a first big step for us here to include the additional analysis that you're used to seeing in BlackLight that will now cover NTFS. We've also added a module, which Drew will go over here shortly as well, specific to the registry, which we know is a unique, important part of Windows analysis. So without further ado, let's get started. If you have any questions or any colleagues, again, that missed this webinar, we'll post it. But more importantly, feel free to get in touch with us at any time. We're happy to do a one-on-one consult and walk you through some of the latest features or answer any questions. Drew?
Thanks, Paul. Let me change my screen over here. All right, so you should be seeing BlackLight. For those of you who've been using BlackLight for a while, you'll notice there have been some subtle updates to the UI for this particular release. I'm just going to minimize this. So what you're looking at is obviously the new UI for 2013 R1. Most of the information hasn't changed. You'll notice that our devices and whatnot are still on the left-hand side here. And so what I'm going to run you through today are some of the items that Paul specifically identified, and then obviously if there are questions, people can bring those up as we go. So the first thing I'll show you is the timeline. You'll notice that on the upper left-hand corner we have a timeline icon. When you click on that, it'll take you into our timeline view. In this particular scenario, what I've done is I've isolated our timeline to two specific devices, a physical iPhone image as well as a logical iPhone image of two separate devices. So what you're looking at is basically a broad overview of the time, and I've narrowed it down just to a particular couple of years. You'll notice that it's from 2011 up to the current date of 2013. The top part of the timeline kind of shows you an overview of every single file timestamp for all devices that exist within the timeline. So you can see between these two particular devices in all of 2011, there were basically 9 files that have timestamps. 2012, you can see they start going up, and then in 2013 we have even more. And obviously that tells me right off the bat that both of these devices were more heavily used in the first part of 2013 than at any other time. The thing about the timeline is we can drill down into specific subsets of time. So if I take this physical iPhone data partition as an example and I drill down into it, you'll notice that it all of a sudden breaks out into further refinement of either files and or communication types. And so when I look at this, we have pop-up windows that can show you for file types. We do the 3 primary types currently, which are the date created, modified, accessed timestamps for files on, in this particular case, HFS. And then for communication, we have the breakdown for email types, SMS, and phone calls. This is just through the initial release. Other file timestamps will be coming further out in the roadmap. But you can choose any of those that you want. And so, again, the items that you see here, so green is communication color coding. And since we're talking about the color coding, it's important to note we do one of two things within our timeline. The first is we do a heat map, and so that's why you'll notice that there are literally different colors. The lighter the color, the less the activity. The darker the color, the more activity. And then in addition to the heat map, we also do kind of a bar graphing. And so obviously the higher the bar, that means the more files on a particular date. So what I've done is I've drilled down one level into the data phone. If I bring it down more, let's say I'm interested in a particular communication of this device on a specific date and time. At least that's the time frame that my analysis is going for. So I'm going to open up the communication here, and you'll notice that we break down all of the timestamps for communication that we're currently indexing, which is email, SMS, and again, phone calls. And so if I'm looking for a particular phone call, an outgoing phone call on a specific date, and let's say that my date time frame is in February of 2013, well, you can see here I have year group 2012-2013, and I'm going to go ahead and look at the outgoing phone call date. And you can see in all of 2013, there were 50 outgoing phone calls. And if I click on that, I see a list of the 50 phone calls. But I want to drill down, so I can do one of two things. I can just double click and it'll redraw the map for me, or I can move in or out with the plus and minus buttons that you'll see here in the upper right hand corner. And of course you can scroll your timeline any which way you want. So you can see now what I've done is I've gone down into the month view. So you see January, February, March. And remember I told you I'm interested in the February, time frame. So I can see February here. If I see that there are 15 phone calls outgoing, I can click on that and then see the 15 phone calls. And if I want to see the actual specific phone call, as an example, let's just say this history ID numbered one is 78, and this is in the call history database. I can double click on this. It will take me to the phone call view, and you can see that there was an outgoing phone call to Sarah Ledoux. Well, that's interesting because she happens to be part of my investigation or my analysis that I'm looking at, and I obviously have, if you already saw, her phone as a logical acquisition into BlackLight here. And over that same time period of February, of all of the activity, there are 387 different file timestamps that make up her phone. So if I drill down into her device and look at communication, remember I'm still in February, and that's the item I have highlighted here. If I scroll down through February onto the different devices and I say look at the SMS devices, SMS messages that were sent in February, there were 21 received, and 24 cent. And if I look at the 21 cent and happen to go through any of these, you can see that these are the IDs within the actual SMS database. Same thing with the cent. I can go through and look at those, and if I want to see the actual SMS, so let's say I want to see what this one is all about, I can click on that. It will take me to the SMS view, and you can see that in this particular SMS view, it is an SMS that was an outgoing from Sarah Ledoux's phone, as you can see it's highlighted here, to Huck Quinn. And so that's kind of how the timeline can kind of show you kind of patterns in the devices that you're looking at. And by default, any device that you bring into BlackLight will automatically get a timeline index built, and then you can basically zoom in, zoom out, and narrow your scope as much as you want. And then sometimes if you have, like in this case, if you have, say, 10 to 15 or more items in your timeline, and you want to reduce what you're looking at, we've built in a simple way to basically get rid of the items that are in the timeline. It's as simple as right-clicking on the device and removing it from your timeline. If you want to bring it back, you basically will go to the device status up on here, and you'll notice that there's a new column called timeline, and you can just run, and it'll re-index all of the files within that particular image and build it back into the timeline. And this doesn't take that long to run. It takes about 30 seconds or so for an iPhone to run a timeline index, and for a 250 gig image of a hard drive, like say an OS X drive, it probably takes about 45 seconds to a minute to build a timeline index. So it doesn't take that long at all. And then once it's been indexed, it'll obviously appear in your timeline with that name. So that's it for the timeline for now for our demonstration. Obviously, if you have questions, feel free to ask, and we'll get to them at the end and come back to those. So some of the other things that Paul talked about were some of our changes and updates to our filtering. So you'll notice now what we have in this particular image, you'll notice right off the bat we have a mountain lion image, the recovery partition for that mountain lion image, and we also have a Windows 7. Now this Windows 7 happens to be a boot camp partition, but and we'll go into that a little bit more in just a little bit. But what I wanted to point out is you'll notice that we still have our file filter view, and I can show you that now. But in addition to the file filter view, we have view filters, which will help you even narrow your items even more. So what I've done is just very quickly, some of this will be a recap of what you may already know, but within our file filter, what I'm currently looking at is my Windows 7 partition. I'm on a file filter, and we have a whole bunch of saved filters that come with BlackLight. And usually we add, as more and more people use the same filters or ask us, we will generate more pre-generated file filters for the users, and these all come default with BlackLight. So as an example, on Windows, if I just wanted to say I want to see all of the files that happen to have geolocation information embedded in them, I'll click on filter, and again I'm on my Windows partition here. I'll filter through these, and you can see I have 381 files that happen to have geolocation information on them. If I just pick on this movie here as an example and look in the attribute tree, you'll notice that there is the GPS data here. Again, as a recap, you can click on the GPS view and get an idea that this is probably taken somewhere in California. If you're connected to the internet, you can again open up on a Google map and get a even better approximation as to where that is. And just like before, you can preview the thumbnails for that movie. You can watch that movie in line, whatever you want to do that's typical with BlackLight. So that's the actual file filter. That hasn't changed other than the fact that we've built in more default saved filters for you. And of course, it now works against Windows as well as iOS and OS X images. So one of the new things that we did with the filtering is depending on the view you're in. So remember on their timeline, we were looking at SMS items. And I happened to see that there was a particular SMS message here that was between Sarah and Huck. Now, I have always been able to have the ability to drill down and say, show me only the items between Sarah and Huck within this drop-down window, so I can see all the SMS messages, I can see the iMessages or whatnot between Sarah and Huck. but we now have the ability in each of these views that you have on BlackLight, we now have a view filter. And so if I click on the view filter, I can now basically build in another structured filter, between each view that I have, and each view is independent. So if I add one, it's context aware. So I'm currently in the messaging view, so if I want to build a filter within my messaging view, it's only going to give me the items that apply to my messaging view. So if I'm looking at a specific date now, I can put in a date, and so let's just say date is exactly, I'll just pick on this and you'll see how it's going to filter it out. I want to look at February 2nd, 2013. And so you notice now I'm only going to get the items that exist within that. And so depending on if you have an image that has 50, 60,000 SMS messages in it, this is a really quick way where you can narrow down your filter within the specific view. And you'll notice that the filter changes. If you for some reason hide this, you'll see instantly that in this view that there's a filter that has been applied. So if you want to unapply it, you basically just get rid of the filter, apply the filter, and now all of your views back. And of course this view works with specifically for messages, whether you're in the conversation view or the list view, it doesn't matter. So that's kind of the individual views. So to give you an idea of another filter view, if I go back to my Windows 7 partition and I go to my internet, you notice that we've changed the internet view here. And there's already a filter that has been applied for me in this particular view that I have opened. So you can see we're now parsing Internet Explorer history. I happen to be on the cache, and I happen to look over, I see my filters applied. So when I click on the filter, I can see what it is. I'm filtering on any URL that contains the word Facebook. And so this happens to be in the Internet Explorer cache, and you can see that this is everything that has anything to do with Facebook that exists specifically in the URL string will appear here in this filter. And I can click through it just like I could before, and any of the items will appear in my preview. And so we did kind of consolidate the internet view so it all becomes into one. So all your Firefox history now will be consolidated into your Firefox history, all of the Chrome, all the Internet Explorer, and all of the Safari. So before we'd had the individual files that you would see, now it's all consolidated into one concise view. So the other item we have within our Windows element is we do and have built a registry viewer, and that sits into the system view. And so when you click on a Windows partition, you will have a registry tab, and we will break down the registry as, people who have been investigating Windows for some time are kind of used to seeing, where you have the HKey local machine and you have the keys that exist within those. So you'll have your SAM, your security software, all of that stuff. We can break it down. There's a text file that we've created that give you the significant items, and this can be added to. So if you have your own investigation and you're always going to the same key, you can add that. So things like if you want to see the USB devices that were ever plugged in, you can do that. You can see here what I've done is I've actually tagged this particular USB key, and so I tagged all of the information that I can include into a report. So you can see that this particular key, this is the serial number for that key. It was last plugged in on March 5th at 1:31 in the afternoon. So really that's it for the registry. You can completely go through the registry looking for particular keys and or hives. If you just basically, on Mac anyway, just do a Command F or the Windows key is a Command F or a Control F on Windows, you can then do a find, and this is recursive, so it doesn't matter what key you're on, it'll search every key for whatever it is that you're looking for. So if you wanted to find a key with a specific value, maybe a specific serial number of a USB key, then you could put that in here and it would find it. And it works basically across both the Unicode and non-Unicode, so ASCII versions within the registry. So that's kind of the registry view. And then there are a couple other things that I wanted to highlight real quick, because I know some people weren't really aware that we've done this. Some people have asked us, at least in our training sessions, many times, how can we split these windows out into different views? And what we've done is we've taken that, and you can create a new window for the case. And so what I'll do is very quickly, I'll just open up a new window. And you see that this is a secondary window for the exact same case. So if I wanted to very quickly, say, compare Huck's phone calls to Sarah's phone calls in a side-by-side manner, I'm just going to hide these filters. I can do that. So I can literally have, if I had two monitors, I can put these side by side and go through them side by side. I can look at the same device and have one within a strings view. So if I'm on Sarah's device, I'm on recent, I can do a preview, so I can look at the database, and over here I can do, a hex view, whatever it is that you're looking at. And they're two independent views, but you can have two independent views looking at the same device or multiple devices. So I just wanted to recap that because I know we get that question quite a lot, and I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of it. So that is really, in essence, the major updates that we've done with this release. There are a lot of, obviously, behind-the-scenes updates, a lot of bug fixes, a lot of improvements. But other than that, what I'll do is I'm going to turn it back over to you, the audience, and see if there are any questions that we will need to answer.
Great, thanks, Drew. We got a couple questions, but just to reiterate for everyone, please, if you have any additional ones, use the questions module in the control panel to log some with us. So one question was asking about identifying iOS backups within an image and importing them if possible. So this is a feature we've had for a while. If you want to bring that up and
sure, that's a good question. We've done it in two different methods. So I'll just, since Windows is new, I'll pick on that. We have a Windows 7 partition here, and when we go to our details view, in our overview, obviously we show a couple of things. We show what version it is. You can see here it's Windows 7 Ultimate install that was installed March 5th, just relatively recently. But we have this history tab, and when you click on the history tab, the first thing you'll notice is we have an iOS backup window, and in this iOS backup window, it will automatically show you any iOS backup that has been saved to that particular partition. So in this case, we have Huck's phone, and you can see that it was an iPhone 4 running iOS 5.1.1, and it happened to be made on March 19th. Well, it's very simple for me to bring this particular image in. I can right-click on this device and import the iOS backup. And this will bring it in, and you'll see it just like this Sarah's phone. In fact, this Sarah's phone is from an iPhone backup, and it was taken in the exact same way from this mountain lion partition. So when I click on here and went to the activity, you see there are 3 different backups in this particular image. I right-clicked on that, imported backup, and that's what brought in this particular Sarah image into my device. And obviously, you could go the hard way. You could go to the browser view and navigate down to where that item would be, right-click, and import as well. It will do the exact same thing as if you were to do it from the iOS backup view. And
just to follow on, the follow-up to that is regarding DMGs found within an image.
So the same kind of thing. If you find a DMG, so really the easiest way is if you do a file filter. We want to do a type of kind. We can do a disk image. So we can do just a DMG. We'll filter on these DMGs. So any of these DMGs, like this update, you can, assuming it's a type of DMG that actually has a file system, you can right-click on it. And one of the things that you'll be able to do is click on Add and Add Selected Image File. So when you click on this, when you click on Add, and there's 2 places to do it. So click on the Add button that's in the device view or within the File menu option. You'll see this Add Selected Image File. And what that will do is it'll bring in the DMG just like as if it was one of these devices. It'll appear here, and then you can do any of your other views.
Perfect. Next question is about Time Machine, actually. So this is a feature we put in R4. It does support Time Machine now, and the question is, are you able to export the Time Machine backups based on the hard links?
And the answer to that is yes. So Time Machines are really interesting. If I go to this Time Machine backup, which I brought in, I'll just do this quick browser view. You'll notice that we actually have Josh Bennett's MacBook here, and this is the Time Machine that Josh Bennett's MacBook was being used to back up. And so the first thing I'll show you is you see these date time folders. Now these are the individual timestamps for each backup that was made. So in many cases, if you were to take this backup and open up the sparse bundle yourself and try to export it, you're going to get multiple copies of the same files, which could lead to quite a bit of data. So in here, what we do, if we open these up, you'll see all these different file types. If you click on any of these folders, the first thing you're going to notice is we automatically identify these as hard links. And so, yeah, you could go through here, search for the particular files, in any of the items within the files that are hard linked. We'll actually go to the proper file and we'll be able to export that particular file.
Perfect. Next question is, since BlackLight can analyze Windows devices, does that mean I can analyze an EL1 image of a Windows machine created by a utility such as FTK?
Yes.
So the EL1 support has existed for a while, and exactly to the customer's question, it now extends to Windows as well, which we're excited to continue to support that format. See here. Another question is regarding signature and carving. I guess they'd just like to know a little bit more about those features, something we put in recently as well.
So signature and carving, this is something that's going to be going through a UI change in our roadmap, but to show you how it works now, you have to go to Window and you have to manage your signature database. And here, by default, it would be blank. You'd have to create a new database. And the reason for this is you have to create your own user signature database before you're allowed to actually create your own headers and whatnot for carving out. So right here, you can see I've already created one called user-defined signatures. You can create as many of these as you want. You'll notice the ones that we have built in, you can't mess with, you can't delete, you can't modify at all. Those are our default ones. But you can add your own after you click create. It'll appear here. And then when you go and are prompted whether it's a new image and you're adding a device and you want to carve out at that time, or come in later and run your unallocated, when you click on run, you'll notice that when the window that opens, you'll see your user-defined signature database. And you can open that up and see anything that you've created. So these are here from the last time we did this, but you can see that I created a signature, an extension called Drew, and it happens to have this header type. But once you have your user-defined signature, you can add your own. So you click on the plus sign, put in the file extension that you want it to be. You have to put in a simple format and a long description, and then obviously the header and the footer, and if there's an offset that is applicable to that. And it can be a regular expression or not. And so once you do that, it will be added, and assuming it's checked here, then it will be carved out from unallocated. So that would be how you do it. Now the one thing, I don't have it set up here, just to clarify that we did change in this release, is you can now view unallocated files that you've carved out within the browser view, and we will break it down into the same format here. So if you carved out archive files, any of these archive files that are typed will actually be listed underneath an archive folder. That doesn't mean there's an archive folder and unallocated. It just means we put it into the same format that was carved out here from this window.
Great. A follow-up question to the EL1 question from other customers. What about Windows volume shadow copies?
We don't currently support the direct analysis of volume shadow copies. You'll be able to see them, and you can then export those. It's something that is on our roadmap to implement analysis for, but we don't currently have a view into those. So
I'm going to work on what we've got on the roadmap. Appreciate the question. Another question is regarding before really importing an image, is there ability to preview a drive somehow using BlackLight? So more of a triage question.
That's a hard question to answer specifically and concisely, because it really depends on how you are bringing in you say preview a drive, but if this is an actual, honest to goodness, say laptop, and you want to be able to preview what's on it before you acquire it, there are ways to do that, as opposed to if it's an image, and there's different ways to do it. So let me explain a little bit better. If I have an individual's laptop and I want to preview it, you could put that laptop into a target disk mode and then connect it to your analysis machine with a write blocker like SoftBlock, and basically go through it in that manner. We don't have, and you can add that within BlackLight, so you can actually add an attached device. And what that's going to do, though, is give you the ability to bring that particular attached device in, but it's not going to allow you to preview it within Windows. That said, if you have an image, so say an EO1 image or a DMG image for that matter, and it's locked, you can mount those images in a read-write fashion and be able to preview it through Finder, or even add those mounted DMGs as an attached device. If it's an EO1, one of the things that ships with BlackLight is EW Mounter, which will mount those EO1 images as read-only, and you can do the same thing. It'll open it up in Finder so you can go through it that way, or you can then also add the attached device if you wanted to do it that way. I mean, you don't need to do that in order to bring it in for analysis, but for simple preview, mount the DMG, mount the EO1. If it's another system, then obviously you could put it in a target disk mode and do it that way as well.
Great. Another question just regarding tagging. So how do I quickly edit tags to understand what's in my report and the ability to toggle back and forth without significant delays?
Well, the tags are all built here under our tags view. So to edit them, you would just click on the tag that you want. So you can see I have two tags set up, one that has 11 items, and one tag that has 2 items. If I click on tag 2, I can instantly rename this to whatever I want. You said I called it Drew. I can put in a narrative. And you can see in this particular tag what I've done is this happens to be the tag from the registry item. And so this registry item information here is what will go into my report. If I click on tag 1, you'll see what I've done is added a whole bunch of different disparate items. So you can see I have videos, I have pictures, SMS messages, and files. Now I can, within the tag view, I have the ability for each independent type. So you can see I can move these up and down depending on where I'm at. I can even move, say, SMSs. If these are more important for me to be at the top of this particular tag, I can move them to the top of my tag, and that's where they'll flow within the report. So whatever I have tagged here, I can modify that. If it happens to be a picture, we have more information. So as an example, I can click on the info and you'll get the metadata window. And so if there happens to be more information, like if I want to add the aspect ratio for this picture, I can do that. Now it will be added. If there's GPS data and I want to add that, I can add that as well as the map for that particular picture. Then when I go to my report view, you'll see that right off the bat, basically we have certain items that are checked here, and that's because that's what I want to show you in my report. So you can see right here I have tag 1 and Drew. If I want Drew to be above tag 1 in my report, I can move it here, and now Drew, which happens to be my registry tag, will appear before anything that was in tag 1. So by default, we'll add all of the details for the devices. You see I have the mountain line device, and so what you're looking at is all of the user details, iPhone backup details, application artifacts in the report. When I go down, here's my Drew tag, here's the item for the registry, and then obviously you see tag 1. So that should answer that question.
Perfect. Another question is regarding language translation capabilities. For example, if I identify email files which are written in Italian, is there a capability to translate any of the text directly to English? Just curious.
Not yet. That's something we could add to our roadmap. I will tell you, for language, we are working on basically localizing BlackLight and Acquisition so that it will work. So if English is not your primary, it'll work in other languages. But what you're asking is the complete reverse of that. And that would take a heck of a lot more development, where if you have say, Italian in your example, and being able to translate that, we'd have to run that through a translation mechanism, if I'm understanding the question correctly. So one of the things that we possibly could look into is the Google Translate API, which could give you kind of a rudimentary option to do that, assuming you're connected. So actually a really good question. That's actually an interesting idea that I think we'll have to take a long, hard look at. It just occurred to me, one of the questions that came up, and I just want to go back and reiterate something about the previewing capability. If you have Macquisition will allow you, either in a live state or a booted state, to preview a system as well. So you can instantly go into the data collection area and get an idea of what the user-generated content is things like email and Safari history or Chrome history or things like that. So that would be another way you could preview the system before you chose to do any sort of collection.
Derek, do you want to jump in here on that?
One other thing we could potentially think about adding maybe fairly quickly is on the translation question, if the analysis system is connected to the internet, we could potentially do something where we can select some text and have some form of control click which would send it over to Google Translate. Again, assuming the system is connected to the internet, and then it would bring up a browser and translate that bit of text, and it would have to be fairly small, I think. We wouldn't be translating volumes, but I think it's a great idea, and it can probably be added to the roadmap in a fairly good time fashion.
Great. That concludes the questions for now. So thank you everyone for joining. We really appreciate it. This webinar will be posted to the website shortly, but again, if you have any specific questions, please let us know, support@blacklightech.com, and we will be in touch to answer any of those. Thanks, and have a great week.